a lot of Republican lawmakers who have kept some distance from Mr. Trump are now starting to look ahead to a post-Trump GOP, if one exists. Among them is Maryland's Governor Larry Hogan, who has been sharply critical of the president's handling of the coronavirus and is thinking seriously, perhaps, about running for the highest office in the land in 2024. And he's also written a new book, which future presidential candidates tend to do. It's called Still Standing: Surviving Cancer, Riots, a Global Pandemic, and the Toxic Politics That Divide America. And Larry Hogan joins me now. And Governor Hogan, just in your subtitle there, it's a reminder you've had a very, very busy tenure as governor of Maryland. But let me start with the crisis at hand right now, and that's the virus. But specifically, let's talk about schools. You have a lot more say than most governors do over your schools. Where are we headed? Could you open schools up 5 days a week in person if you wanted to?
Well, we could if we wanted to, but look, I think everybody would like to get our kids back to school as quickly as we can. But we also want to do it and make sure that our kids are going to be as safe as possible. So we're not going to be rushed into this. From the beginning of this crisis, we've always been working very closely with our doctors, our scientists, and our epidemiologists to make sure that we're doing the things that make the most sense. And our state superintendent of schools will be sitting down this week to get a report from her. She's been meeting with all of the local jurisdictions and with all of the top health professionals, getting all the stakeholders' input, and we're going to come up with a plan that's probably going to be a hybrid that talks about how we're going to provide the best education we can for our kids and do it in a safe way.
Let's talk about the bigger picture here, 30,000 feet. You're on these weekly phone calls with the task force because they supposedly have these open lines with all of the governors. We hear about this from the vice president a lot. But results are just that. Why are we in a worse position than Europe, from your perspective?
Well, it's a great question. First of all, yes, we are now doing weekly calls. It started out, I think, a couple of times a week, and I'll give the administration credit for this. They've done an excellent job of communicating with all of the governors from the beginning of the crisis. Almost all of the nation's governors are on these video conference calls with sometimes the president, but typically the vice president runs these calls with the coronavirus task force, many of the cabinet members, and they try to keep us up to date. I think they've made some progress in a number of areas with respect to now getting PPE out to some of the states and working together with us, but there's no question that mistakes were made. That we should have had a national testing strategy, that we should have been on top of this, that we should have had a much more clear national strategy and been communicating much earlier on in the process. And I think governors had to step up and be on the front lines, but we had 50 different states with 50 different strategies, and some did better than others.
Is this ultimately, I mean, you're talking about your communication, lines of communications are open and things like that. So essentially, this is a leadership problem. Does this come from the president? Is it the president's leadership that has led us down this path?
Well, look, I don't want to spend a lot of time just criticizing in the middle of the crisis because I don't like the Monday morning quarterback, but I haven't been afraid to speak up when I thought something was wrong or when I thought that they were off on the wrong direction, and I'll continue to do so. I lead the nation's governors, and on every single week's call, I usually raise issues of concern on behalf of my colleagues, on behalf of my state, and on behalf of my colleagues across the country on both sides of the aisle. There's no question that things could have been done better from the beginning of this crisis. And look, but right now it doesn't do any good. We've got to deal with the situation at hand, and we've all got to do the best job we can because this thing is out of control. It's by no means behind us. And we're all in it together, and we've got to work together at the federal, state, and local level.
I want to talk a little politics with you. What do you make of the future of the Republican Party after this election if the president wins a second term? Is there room in this Republican Party for you if the president wins a second term?
Well, look, I think regardless of what happens in November, there are an awful lot of people in America that are completely frustrated with politics today and the divisiveness and dysfunction in Washington. And I think the Republican Party, but quite frankly, both parties, are going to be re-examining about what the future looks like. I'm a lifelong Republican who has not been afraid to stand up and disagree with the president on any number of issues. I don't know what the future holds in November, but I know that the Republican Party is going to be looking at what happens after President Trump, and whether that's in 4 months or in 4 years. And I think they're going to be looking to how do we go about becoming a bigger tent party. How do we, in Maryland, I'm in the bluest state in America. I just was reelected overwhelmingly in 2018 by reaching out, by trying to find that middle ground where people can stand together, and by avoiding divisive rhetoric and winning suburban women, winning over Democrats and independents, and winning with minority votes. And I think that's something the Republican Party is going to have to look to. We're going to have to find a way to appeal to more people and have a bigger tent.
Do you think this Roger Stone commutation is one of those things that just sets the party back a little bit on things like believing in the rule of law and sort of having some sort of, where it looks like there's a double standard? If you're close to the president, you get a break. If you're not, you go to jail.
Well, there's no question that's the appearance, and it's a problem. And look, Roger Stone is convicted of 7 felonies. Look, the president does have the right by law to take the action he took. That doesn't mean he should have. And we've got a guy who's convicted of 7 felonies a couple of months before election. For the president to take this action, it's certainly going to hurt politically.
You said 4 years ago you wrote in your father for president. You didn't vote for President Trump, but you didn't vote for Hillary Clinton either. Can you imagine pulling the lever for Joe Biden?
I feel I'm in the same kind of position I was 4 years ago. Look, right now, luckily, as chairman of the National Governors Association, I get to avoid a little politics for a little while because I represent Democratic and Republican governors together and don't have to get too actively involved in the political games. But I'll have to make that decision between now and November. I'm in the same position a lot of people in America are, I think, but really frustrated that this is the best we can come up with on both sides of the aisle. It's a difficult choice. I think most people would like to see something different, and maybe we'll figure that out in 2024.
Larry Hogan, the Republican governor of Maryland, and your new book is out. I appreciate you coming on and sharing your views with us this morning, sir. And stay safe out there.
Thank you, Chuck.